remind. And hope you enjoy.
Hi everyone. I don't know how many people are there already, but I think we will have to wait one more minute. That will be okay. Meanwhile, I invite you to introduce yourself in the chat. Just write your name and where you're from and your organization, please. And we will be starting soon. So I think we're good now. So thank you for joining us today for this Bridge 47 Network Focus Group. I'm glad that you joined us and that you that you didn't have any problem with the time, because I know that some of it was not very clear at what time we were starting. So I'm glad that you're all here. So today we will be focused on the Futures of Education UNESCO's Futures of Education initiative. Alan, can you change the slide, please? Yes, but first I would like to quickly introduce Bridge 47 for those who doesn't know who we are. So Bridge 47 is a network and at the same time EU-funded project co-created with 15 different organizations from Europe and global civil society organizations. We have different objectives. The first one is to gather people from all over the world and give them the opportunity to learn and unlearn what they know on transformative education, and also to contribute to a transformation towards global justice in the society through global citizenship education. So on the next slide, you will see a very great picture that sums up what we do. So we have we are a network, but we also have advocacy activities at the national, but also European and global level. We also build partnerships with different organizations, different stakeholders that are not necessarily involved, used in to be involved in global citizenship education or transformative education. And we also build capacity, organization capacity in global citizenship education. So you have you have the 15 organization. You can see the 15 organization, and yes, so yes, please. So today, why are we here? We're here because UNESCO's UNESCO has launched an initiative on the futures of education, and also they launched consultation to everyone who would like to share their ideas on the futures of education. And the Bridge 47 network thought that that would be a great opportunity to give to reflect on the futures of education, and more specifically on the future of transformative education. So just we will have a look at a video that introduces the Futures of Education initiative. So I need to share my screen. Well, sorry. Just Alan, how can I share my screen, please?
You have on the lower tab the green share screen, and then
oh yes,
you just select YouTube, the browser and YouTube.
Thank you.
And unmute the share computer sound on top.
Sure.
There should be an option to just share sound. Yeah, it's mute. So when you click on top, there is an option to share computer sound on Zoom.
Yes. And now?
Excellent.
Yes. It works.
I did that for you, sorry, Rosemary.
What kinds of futures do we want to shape? Accelerated climate change, artificial intelligence and biotechnology, increasing exclusion and fragmentation. Our world is becoming more complex and uncertain with many disruptive challenges. Knowledge and learning are humanity's greatest renewable resources for responding to challenges and inventing alternatives. Yet, education doesn't only respond to a changing world. Education transforms the world. But to create the futures we want, we must rethink education. UNESCO has launched a global initiative to reimagine how knowledge and learning can shape the future of humanity and the planet. We are looking at 2050 and beyond, and we want to partner with you to discuss, debate, and re-envision the ways education enables us to become what we want to become. For ourselves, for each other. Thinking together so we can act together. Join the conversation and let's make the futures we want.
Thank you. So yes, we're why in the next slide, please. So why does Bridge 47 Network organize this focus group? Because we thought that would be that's important to mobilize our network, and first to reflect on the role of transformative education in the future, but also to contribute to this initiative. And because UNESCO will publish a report after this broad consultation. The report will be published in autumn 2021, and we would like that transformative education is included, the importance of transformative education is included in this report. And this webinar is objective is to reflect on how can transformative education help to address the different challenges we will have to face in the future. So now let's have a quick look at the agenda. So we will have two speakers today that will share their ideas. The first one will be Dalene Swanson from the University of Stirling, and the second one, Giovanna Modé from CLADE in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Then we will have a quick Q&A with the speakers. That will be very quick, but we will have another one at the end. Then you will be divided into different groups in breaking rooms with Zoom, and you will discuss on different questions that I will share with you later. Then we will have a break, a 5-minute break. And when we will come back, we will just sum up the outcome of the discussions you will have, because you will take notes on a Padlet during the first small group discussion and also during the second small group discussion. And then we will have 20 minutes to to discuss the small group both small group discussions outcomes, but also ask questions to each other, to the speakers, and also comment anything you would like to comment. And then we will have a very short conclusion. So now Dalene will be speaking. So just to present her, Dalene Swanson is a senior academic at the University of Stirling. Her research work spans social and ecological justice, critical global citizenship education, critical mathematics education, critical art-based methodologies, including narrative and Ubuntu and indigenous Unto epistemologies. She's on the International Advisory Board of the UNESCO Chair in Democracy, Global Citizenship and Transformative Education. And she's also a PI at the UCRI, and I don't know exactly, DCRF Water and Fire Project. I will share with you the link of this project in the chat. And now, Dalene, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rosamine. I am unable to share my screen until you unshare yours. Let me see if I can do this now. Bear with me a moment, please. I managed to do it. Thank you so much, Rosamine, and it's a real pleasure to talk with you today, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's also a great honor and pleasure to talk with Giovanna today, and we've only recently met each other. Thank you so much. So I'm going to be talking on the futures of education, and a lot of this work comes out of a couple of initiatives in collaboration with Bridge 47, Northern European Knowledge Exchange Partnership, which one was held in January 2020, which I initiated along with Tanya Wisely, which was based in Scotland at the University of Stirling, and then another one which was the Danish link to that. Sonja Salminen was involved in the development or leadership of that one in June 2020. So looking at what we mean by transformative learning. So current definitions are around the expansion of consciousness, which means changes in how the self is viewed, changes in conviction, and changes in lifestyle, or changes in how we live. So those are some of the common understandings of what we mean by transformative learning. But I want to go a step further as an advocate of transformative education and engage a little bit more critically with what we mean by these terms. So what are we trying to transform? Who are we trying to transform, and why are we trying to transform, and what are our assumptions? Are our assumptions correct in what it is that we think we are needing to transform? So what might it mean to transform education? We need to have a particular view of what education might be. A lot of discourse on simply access to education and education as a right. But if we look at what the content of that education is it colonizing? Is it allowing for local knowledge or different communities to serve their particular needs? Or is there a universal understanding or an instrumental understanding of what education is? So we have to really pick apart these terms, the transformative as well as the education. So what might we mean by education in order to transform it would be a key question that we could ask. What does it mean to transform versus reform? We know very well that the neoliberal globalization, the current world order, is very much focused on reformism, which has very little to do with transforming, and it's actually reinforcing often very coercive and problematic versions of the world and the status quo, and promoting a capitalist world order. So acceleration of change would be another question versus, so what do we mean by change? What is it that we want to change versus the notion of to protect, to preserve, to care, which draws attention to some of our language, the problem of adaptive systems. We're being asked to adapt to climate change. We're being asked to adapt to the way things are or the way things are going. The word flexibility is another one of those. Usually when you're being asked to be flexible in your workload, which we as academics are often asked to do, that means given little space to be able to do the work that you need to do, but being asked to do very much more. Usually single mums are asked to be flexible in their work, and that's supposed to be a good thing, but actually it means exploitation. And the word resilience, a word that I've had to try and reappropriate, but the term resilience is one of those words where, like transformation, we think that we need to make others resilient. Resilience comes from the term, it originates from engineering. When you bend a pencil and you try to find out how resilient it is before it breaks. And now this is being transposed onto vulnerable communities often. When we're asking them to be more resilient, to have to deal with extreme events and disasters, and have to deal with their existing poverty. So we need to be very careful about the language that we live by. So how can we promote transformative education to transform lives when we don't recognize our role in the process in reproducing and perpetuating systems of complicity? Is our transformation education coercive, or is it responsive to the needs of communities and local knowledge? Is it on others or working with others in solidarity? And Su Ming Koo has provided a very, very useful contribution to how we can think about solidarity, which she did in the last Bridge 47 conference that we had with our Danish partners in June. So that brings me to the idea of my work through the UKRI GCRF, which is Global Challenges Research Fund. It's a UK-based funding stream, water and fire, and the project is enhancing capacity and reducing risk through 15 bets of transformative adaptation, there's that term again, with vulnerable residents on the Cape Flats of South Africa. And how the difficulty that I've had in having to appropriate and reappropriate some of this language, which has very problematic under leanings or the vestiges of meanings that align with neoliberal discourses. One of the aims of the GCRF Water and Fire, and in February I went back to the Cape Flats in South Africa to engage with the 3 communities that we're working with, to ask them again, are our aims and our objectives correct? Are these the right things that we should be doing with you? How can you lead on these issues? And I'm just highlighting this one, to create alternative development pathways for sustainability by co-mobilizing local knowledges and multiliteracies, by engaging Indigenous processes for democratic participation and dialogue in disaster risk reduction with marginalized communities. And so it's that notion about co-mobilizing local knowledges and working from the bottom up, and co-production, not imposing on people what we think they need to know or they need to do to be resilient or to be helped, so to speak. So talking again about the agenda and what we're here for today in terms of the UNESCO Futures of Education and what the objectives are, to mobilize the Bridge 47 network and reflect on the role of transformative education in addressing these challenges. I'm not going to rehearse what these challenges are. I think it's become very self-evident to many of us what needs to be done. It's about how we need to do it that probably needs more attention. And so looking at the UNESCO guidelines, this is what is up on the UNESCO site around public action related to the futures of education. And so each one of these, we probably need to not just take on board unproblematically, but actually also look at the assumptions that underpin them. Not that they're not good things, they're very good things, but we do need to also look at the possible ways in which they can be reappropriated away from transformative possibilities. So strengthening public commitment to education as a common good. So when we use the term common good, for whom is there the common good? Common to whom? Is this about universal education and access to universal education? Is it about standardized curricula? Or is it about responding to the educational needs of communities in a local way or in a globalizing way? An expanded understanding of the right to education. Yes, that's unquestionable, the right to education, but does it go beyond simply access to education? Is it about what kind of education and how we think about education as well, alongside thinking about the rights to education? The value of the teaching profession and teacher collaboration. Well, there's huge contradictions around that as well. I just have to draw attention to what has happened here in the UK around the COVID-19 situation and the results. The SQA, which is the Scottish Qualifications Association results, where they downgraded teachers' assessments of their own pupils' level of achievement or attainment. And it caused a huge furore here in Scotland. But at the heart of that was a distrust for teachers, distrust for how teachers could view and know their own students. The SQA would know better about those assessments than teachers who actually were teaching their own classes, teaching their own students. So this issue of profession is a very serious one. Hi there, Rosie.
Sorry. We don't have much
Okay.
time left, please.
Okay, I'll just finish off with this one as well. So again, we can go through each one of these, emphasizing youth participation, and actually do an interrogation of each one of those and look at the assumptions and how they can be reappropriated as well. This is just to highlight some of the work that I've done on guiding principles of critical global citizenship, looking at knowledge and perspectives, countering paternalism, power and privilege, global and local justice or globalization, the importance of reflexivity, and this PowerPoint will be shared with you. But one thing which I think we need to address as well, which is the importance of being informed. Too little is often paid to being informed, and we want to transform people, or we want to do transformative education without helping young people or fostering a sense of wanting to be informed and what that actually means to be informed. And also the notion of being still. What is it that we want to change, but how do we also be still with others? How do we preserve? What about the indwelling with others, which also aligns with Ubuntu? So I'm going to finish off with that. These are some of the images that I've used to help my students critically engage with what it means to do critical global citizenship and transformative education. And then this, to finish off, the two imaginaries of Scotland, the one of empire and this reality on the ground. And so I just want to say that transformative education, I think, means being humble. Being humble to other ways of knowing and being, to authentic listening, to being in solidarity alongside those who have been oppressed, to understand how we are implicated and our complicity in global systems of oppression, of learning to be still as one important element of a repertoire of possible actions towards opening up futures of education, renewal, and a viable planetary existence for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dalene, for your remark and for reminding us what is transformative education, even if we almost everyone who is there works in this field. We don't have necessarily the same definition of transformative education. So now we will be listening to Giovanna Modé. She's the head of policy, at the Latin American campaign for the right to education. The right to education, an international network based in Sao Paulo. So which is part of International Council for Adult Education, one of Bridge 47 consortium partner. She actively participated in the civil society advocacy process towards the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals at the United Nations, and more recently in its follow-up and implementation in Latin America and the Caribbean. She has also taken part in the creation and implementation of the inclusive education regional and she earned a PhD last year in sociology of education at the School of University of Sao Paulo, and her research topics include education, human rights, and international migration. So she will give us a different perspective from Dalene Swanson, because she's working in the advocacy field. And now, Giovanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rosemin. Can you hear me? Just confirm, please. Okay. So thank you so much for this invitation. We are really glad to be part of this focus group. As Rosemin was saying, I'm part of the Latin America campaign for the right to education. And it's a regional network with members in 18 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we are also part of the Global Campaign for Education that some of you might know, as well as a member of the International Council for Adult Education. I'm very happy to see some ICAI colleagues here too. We are also following the Futures of Education initiative, and it seems for us such an important exercise, this opportunity to reimagine, to think, and to talk about our future. There are obviously so many aspects to talk about and more questions than everything in this exercise. And here I chose, in this just a few minutes, maximum 10 minutes, basically 3 or 4 points to raise as initial thoughts for having in mind what we are about to do. First of all, I must say that transformative education is a key priority for CLADE, as well as for so many other networks that we work with, CSOs, special social movements all over the world. And it is so important precisely because it is linked with the notion of change and justice. In Latin America, a key influence, I must say, and a privilege for us that, is the legacy of Paulo Freire and the popular education movement from decades ago. And his key point was to build knowledge as a tool to change the reality, to promote critical thinking, so people can generate action, can build proposals, alternatives. That is what we really need nowadays. He was talking about personal and social transformation. A pedagogy of indignation, as he would say, is also a pedagogy of hope. But being 2020, as we should remind ourselves how far we are from that. That's really important to have this in mind. And thus, how important is this exercise we are doing right now? Perhaps I will share a pair of examples here. As I'm speaking from Brazil, it is really hard not to mention the conservative and authoritarian wave we're living in, not only here. One of the first messages of the president of this country was precise on the field of education, was precisely related to his will to eliminate all Paulo Freire's influence from schools, as well as other forms of political discussions and much more. He was personally and officially encouraging students to watch their teachers, to film, recording them when expressing their own views. This had a huge symbolism behind, but the issue I wanted to highlight here is that we are living in an era of poor thinking, in an era of non-dialogue. And I think the absence of dialogue is a reason for concern, because it can be a kind of violence too, and that's really important to have in mind. Another way to see how far we are is to realize how the discourses that reduce education, I think Dalene was touching on this point, that these discourses that reduce education to measurable learning outcomes prevails. So many, I mentioned, there's so many debates around basic skills for labor markets, discussing those very basic learning process that can be measured through usually standardized tests, usually international tests. And to talk about transformative education, we have to tackle this somehow to shift this paradigm. I'm sharing those examples because I believe that when we talk about transformative education, we should refer not only to something extra or related to special project that in case you have enough resources, you can include, but as a key component of quality education, the heart of quality education, I would say. And unless we consider this aspect, it will never reach its full potential. And this latest reflection leads me to the second point I wanted to raise, that we can only achieve the potential of transformative education unless it is treated as a human right, in fact. Unless if we are talking about an inclusive education for all, we are not reaching this potential. So it is crucial in this exercise also to do not forget our unfinished business, particularly the importance of meeting SDG 4, and hopefully much before 2050 in this case. perhaps reminding ourselves of the very basic issues of access, infrastructure, water, among other points, underfunded schools. I mean, we can't forget during this exercise that in order to promote transformative education, we need strong public and inclusive education systems for all. It can't be reduced to a privilege of those ones who can afford it. And now moving on very quickly to my third point, in particular being from civil society, I really wanted to stress the importance of participation and governance. That is something really crucial for us. So who defines what is education for? Who defines what is meaningful education? We are not moving on without involving communities on this debate, and particularly the students themselves. In the last few months, just before the COVID outbreak, we carried out a participatory research in several countries here in Latin America, basically listen to secondary students, so very young, 13, 14 or less, asking the very simple question on what, and complex at the same time, that is, what education we want, you want. So this exercise was so inspiring. They were talking about critical thinking, about dialogue, about decolonial curriculum, intercultural curriculum, gender, racism, and among so many other issues. Obviously, they wanted to be prepared for a decent job, to access languages, to succeed in their careers. But if we listen carefully, we realize they want much more. And we can go far beyond the basics in this case. So it is crucial to have meaningful participation at the decision-making process. I mean, at all levels, from local to national, regional, and global. And not only to identify what they are saying, but what they are doing as well. I mean, to identify in the middle of this multiple crises, there's so many inspiring initiatives that they are taking place in right now at local levels, aiming at transforming their environment. I think the international literature likes to name them as good practice. But the question is, how can these local initiatives scale up and change the global narrative, maybe, and more, how can they inform national and global policies? I think that's something really important for us to have in mind. And finally, just to conclude, or maybe not, to open for more questions, I would say that the education we want must come very connected with the question on the world we want, a world worth living in. It is a pedagogical exercise, but it is also a political and ethical exercise. How do we want to share this world with others? Who are we in relation to others? We need to have a purpose as society now. What do we want to build? Do we have an agreement on that? I understand we will be talking about it. So I will stop here with this question, and perhaps just to finish again, quoting Paulo Freire, when he stated that education cannot change the world, but can transform people. And yes, people can change the world. So, okay, I think I made my 10 minutes here. So, and we can open for discuss further during the groups. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Giovanna, for your remarks. We won't be able to take questions now, but we will have, you will have the opportunity to ask questions at the end. I think now it's time to go to small group discussions. And I hope that those two speeches gave you some food to thought, and that you have, you have an idea of what you would like to share during those small group discussions. So you will be divided into different groups with 4 people. I would like you, during this first discussion, I would like you first to introduce yourself, to have a very short introduction round, like 30 seconds maximum, please, in order to have the time to discuss further on what we will, why we here today. And then I would like you to think about 2050, so to contemplate the world in 30 years. So I took those questions from the UNESCO guidelines because I think that that will be very helpful for us to imagine how we think the world will be in 30 years. So what for you, what are you most hopeful about? And according to you, what challenges, will be the greatest challenges in 2050? So what are you most concerned about? So I picked some topics like injustice, armed conflict, war. You can either discuss those topics, or you can also, if you would like to raise other challenges, you're free to do it, and just pick one or two or three challenges and just explain why you think that those topics will be challenges in 2050. And in every group, I would like you to share on the Padlet. Alan just shared on the Padlet that we will be sharing with you. No, Alan have done it yet. Thank you, Alan. To share on the in the Padlet the key points you discussed during those small group discussions. So Alan will be divide us into breaking rooms.
Has anyone else tried to reach the Padlet? Is there a problem with the Padlet for others too, or it seems someone, Renate, has a problem? Okay, maybe just Renate, try refresh the page. It should work then. So maybe just to show you, in case you are not familiar with the Padlet, just quickly, it's very, very simple. So this is the Padlet. It looks like a small board. And so after your discussion, just please, as Rosmin said, please have at least one post per, you can make it by clicking on the plus in the lower bottom corner. And every group should have at least one post-it with summary of what you have been discussing, so that when we will be producing the report after the event, that we will be sending to UNESCO, all your thoughts are taken into account. So it's very, very important that you write down. You can also write additional individual ones if you wish, but at least one per group, please. All right. I will now split you into groups of 4, and you will have 20 minutes for the first discussion. And after, we will have another one. All right. So just accept the invitation. It will come now. So just click on accept. Hi, Brahma. Hello. Now people are in group discussions in smaller groups at the moment. They just I think we are back.
So, welcome back. While you were discussing, I had a look on what you were writing, and I see that the terms best practices was everyone did not agree with the term best practices. It was quite discussed. Of course, I was not thinking about real best practices, but it's a common way to say that we want to share only practices, and I don't know why we say best practices. So some of you suggest that we learn from movements and to bring concepts into classroom, like the Black Lives Matter movement. And also, I will not highlight everything you said, but just give some points. But also, some of you think that we should rethink learning beyond curricula and testing decolonized education. We have some Bridge 47 members who are quite involved in that area. Well, the Padlet is everything is mixed up, so I'll try to find. Also, some of you highlighted the importance of non-formal education in the community, to care work in response to COVID. So yes, that's something that we should highlight in our report to UNESCO. I hope you had the chance to have a look at what was written by the other groups. Now we will have some like 20 minutes to ask questions to the speakers, but also to react, comment, ask questions to other groups. So first, I would like you, if you have questions, please share them in the chat box. If you have questions for the speakers first, please share them in the chat box. Yes, I know that the time was too short, but if you want to add something, you can now. But also, if you have other ideas, please feel free to send me a message if you have other ideas to include in the report that will be sent to UNESCO. Please feel free to write me an email, and I will try to do my best to include your thoughts. So, are there any questions for the speakers? Or any comments on the discussions? Any other comment?
Would anyone want to share something that they felt really strongly about in the discussion, something that really sparkled a lot of conversation in your groups, or just something that was really interesting that you heard in the presentations? We are a relatively small group, so please don't be shy. You can also write in the chat box if you prefer.
Yeah, I mean,
Can I?
Yeah, I mean, whoever wants to go.
Okay, maybe Benjamin and then Timothy, if that's okay.
Cool. Yeah, so just to kind of bring up what we talked about in the second group, because I thought it was interesting. We are the ones who wrote, okay, there's maybe anti-racist education or Black Lives Matter and other movements, and bringing those dialogues into classrooms in like creative ways, or there's more reflexive education. I have done phenomenon-based learning, but I think that like the question, like what we kept saying, like these different types of education, is that we don't actually know what transformative education looks like, because I think that we're only now just learning like what kind of result we would want to see in our peers and students. So to say, oh, okay, maybe it's more of an anti-racist education or a civil rights education, or maybe more like reflexive. Maybe that's what would provide this expansion of consciousness, But I think what would be nice to provide, or to see, if anyone has any case studies to share of different methodologies, like whether it's classroom methodologies or education frameworks that have been implemented and studied. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges is tracking the data, right? Do we have any impact data to show that, okay, if we apply these supposedly alternative types of education to schools and classrooms, like will that produce transformation? How do you quantify it? How do you qualify it? Who determines whether you've succeeded? I guess something that we could do is to take Dalene's framework here, or at least the beginnings of a framework, talking about expansion of consciousness. What, who, and why. Are we transforming? People. Is the transformation just? Is it colonial? Are there indicators to determine whether it is or is not? I guess that's the way that I'm thinking about the difficulty in answering this last section of questions. Yeah, sorry. I hope that didn't just kill the discussion.
No, can I? Can I continue? No, I think we go back also to the question of language. I think when we talk, I mentioned in our group, the use of global, we go back very much to the idea of people-centered. And about 95% of our problem at the moment is to do with the climate emergency and with ecological crisis, etc., is that we are completely obsessed with human beings and not with a balance between the different forms of life which inhabit the planet. And therefore, we need to get away from this very self-centered view that living is about human beings on the planet, and the rest of it has to get on with it. and we've got to get an education which helps us to understand our place within the planet and the place of life, other forms of life, and that if there is no balance between the different forms of life, then to 2050 probably won't arrive, or if it arrives, it's going to be a very unpleasant place to live in, especially for human beings.
Thank you, Timothy, for the remarks. Does anyone want to react to this? I think Sunming has also a comment, but does anyone want to comment, react on what Benjamin and Timothy have just said?
Well,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, if somebody else wants to talk.
Yeah, it's really difficult to see who's talking. Hi, it's Renata here. I just wanted to second what Tim was saying, because to me that's the real fundamental shift we need to make, is sort of to impart somehow, which also means we have to change a relational way of approaching, you know, everything, education, the way we think, because it's not relational. We are very anthropocentric, but also this kind of whole tradition of thinking, you know, part of our educational backgrounds is sort of this atomized thinking, and that's behind all the problems we have. So for me, the key challenge is how do you embody as a teacher, and then embody it in the material and the learning experiences you provide, and a relational perspective, which means on every level, human life, plant life, the whole context. And that's where sort of I was very interested in Dalene's concept of Ubuntu, or what she's written about. Of course, it's not her concept, because that is a relational paradigm. And of course, a lot of the indigenous models have a relational paradigm. Of course, one can't appropriate, but you know. So to me, that's the key question. It's not how do you tinker with this, that, or the other. That's the fundamental shift we need to make, and then from there, different things can happen. So yeah, I want to second what Tim had just said.
Thank you, Renata. I would like just very quickly give the floor to Sunming. I think she had a comment, and then Dalene.
I just wanted to follow on from what Timothy had said, and just to bring it back to something that Giovanna said in her presentation, her second point about what is happening in Brazil, leading to, you know, the crackdown and an attempted elimination of critical thinking, of Freirean education. And at the heart of this is the opposite of, it's exclusive anthropocentrism. So the problem is not just anthropocentrism. The problem is dehumanization within the assumption of who is the human, who are the humans. And so part of the disrespecting other forms of life goes along with disrespecting other human forms of life, as well as non-human forms of life. So it's a kind of an artificial, and it can be an unhelpful distinction to say, oh, you know, it's just all the humans in it for themselves, and they're killing the planet. And this is really not the concrete problem that is happening. The concrete problem is this really horrific right-wing mobilization of what could only be called necropolitics, the politics of making others die, whether those are human others or non-human others. So I just really very strongly wanted to say that, and want to say that whatever it is that we are doing in global citizenship education, we have to be addressing this drift in politics and society globally, whether it's in the Philippines, or whether it's in India, or whether it's in Brazil, or North America, or in our own wherever country, Black Lives Matter movements, or whatever it is, that it is dehumanization of human beings going alongside destruction of the environment and the non-human beings. So global citizenship has to look at those who have been excluded from citizenship and ejected from the possibility of being citizens. having standing. So I just really strongly wanted to say this.
Thank you, Sumin, for this.
Long rant, sorry.
No problem. I will just give the microphone to Dalene. I think she had a comment first, and then Renata, so that you wanted to speak.
I think I'm just trying to pull a lot of those conversations together, and I'm going to respond by just giving a little bit of a narrative response. In South Africa, during apartheid and during the anti-apartheid struggle, there was a lot of discourse on how dysfunctional the schools were, and the so-called rioting, and schools were a hotbed of activism, and no so-called learning, that was what was being said, was going on. And yet at the same time, there was this movement called the people's education. And it actually was the youth at universities and in schools that helped overthrow apartheid. And, you know, so when we advocate that we need to have a certain kind of education, we need to also realize that in the absence of this so-called education, things happen, and young people have agency, and they can respond to the politics of the moment, and sometimes they can lead on what the curriculum needs to be. You know, I listened in, I was actually almost in tears. I was just so proud. The other day, there was, I think it was yesterday, they launched the climate charter, the South African Climate Charter, and here were these young South Africans presenting on the cases for what is being demanded as a charter, as a climate charter for South Africa, and it was just so incredibly inspiring. And then, you know, behind that is these discourses that 85% of schools are dysfunctional, or this, that, and whatever. You know, so these things are in contradiction, and they hit against each other in particular ways, and we need to kind of absolutely unpack those things and try and understand what it is. What is it that motivates towards transformative education, and what young people can actually do to transform and lead on these particular issues? And I completely agree with Su-Ming as well, that that it's not the anthropomorphism that's the problem, but the way in which people are excluded from particular forms of citizenship, that they are uncitizenized. And yet at the same time, that can become a catalyst for some very powerful responses that we all need to listen to. You know, transformative education is a form of being humble, as a form of listening, as a form of being still and listening authentically. Thanks.
Thank you, Dalene. Yes, Renata.
Just to come back, so thanks very much, Dalene, as well, for what you just said. I totally agree. And I also completely agree with Su-Ming. I don't see it as an either or. I see, you know, if you can treat human beings like this and exclude them and dehumanize, it's because the mindset is a lack of relationality. So I do think, I see that, you know, expresses in all kinds of directions. And I don't want to see it as an exclusive, you know, anthropocentric problem. It's a problem of how we are in the world, and that expresses in different ways. So yeah, just wanted to say that, add that.
Thank you, Renata. We have a comment from Su-Ming. She's saying that, also thinking about Ben's thoughts, I worry about the accountability and impact demands. They can easily go in an uncaring and harmful direction. Does anyone want to react to this or add something on what has been said?
Yeah.
I can see that. Renata?
Yeah, see, I don't know how am I supposed to speak or wait? Thank you. I completely agree. You know, as somebody who works in a British education, higher education context, you know, it's just crazy what we're supposed to do. On the other hand, I proposed that in one of my discussion groups. I think it also, one has to do a two-tier strategy. I mean, that's certainly what I'm trying to do. Yes, we have to tick the boxes and sort of create the facade and the kind of image. But within that, I think one can actually create some space to do something quite different. So I think it just becomes a way of navigating this. Not that I want to speak, you know, sort of encourage the way this kind of bureaucratic machine is operating at all. It's just a way of navigating and yeah, bringing a humanity back into it through the back door, something along these lines, as much as one can.
Yeah, and just to kind of bounce off of that and bounce off of Sue, yeah, thinking about, yeah, collecting impact data, for example. And I also, I think about like what motivates people to action, especially the people who aren't having these conversations, right? The people who aren't maybe academically inclined to discuss transformative education or what the meaning of transformation is. And yeah, so what gets people to act? And the one thing that comes to mind is like seeing supposed results, which of course can also be skewed and dehumanizing, and also focus on I don't know, on can be refocused in inappropriate ways, we'll say. And so the other way to maybe counter that, or to think differently about it, is narrative construction and being able to tell a compelling story rather than provide impact data, just as a way to get people into this conversation, right? To get people, more and more people on board. How do you provide that convincing argument that people and systems should think about the things that we are thinking about right now?
That's a very interesting question. Does anyone want to answer this question? Or also, Timothy is asking, do you see the 2030 agenda as a means of achieving global citizenship education? That's very interesting, because we normally see global citizenship as a way to achieve the 2030 agenda. So does anyone wants to react to this? No, no one?
Sorry. I said maybe it's the other way
up.
around in response to Timothy's question. Was it the one about the 2030 agenda? Yeah, I think that the 2030 agenda is not the means of achieving global citizenship. I think global citizenship is the means to achieving the 2030 agenda, because otherwise people will be left behind and there will be more inequality, there will be more poverty. So I don't see how, I just think it's, yeah, the cart cannot be the way to realize the horse.
Timothy, could you just explain why did you think about this question, and what is on your mind?
Okay, I think we have the 2030 agenda has been put forward as a way of trying to establish a less unequal world, attempting to face up to some of the challenges, but at the same time it's been manipulated in a way that is quite clearly neoliberal in its intent, So I think that the chance of success between, in inverted commas, for the 2030 agenda is very limited. I wonder whether in a way the 2030 agenda is a sort of red herring that if we invest too much in it, we shall lose sight of what are the real problems and how to go about. I mean, the idea of the 2030 agenda is, I couldn't see who mentioned the question of the narratives, but we have to create a new compelling narrative. Is the 2030 agenda the new compelling narrative? Is it going to bring everyone on board? Or, how do we go about, there's a lovely quote by Ivan Illich who says, how do you go about telling a new story? And when you tell a new story, you have to incorporate the past, all the pieces from the past in order to advance to the future. And so how do we tell this new story in which there is a new relationship between people and between all different forms of life? Now, I quite agree that, we still have to, there's a Brazilian indigenous leader who asks, when we talk about humanity, who fits in your humanity? We talk about humanity. Are indigenous people humans? And he questions this, whether he actually feels humans in the terms that humans talk about themselves. So I think that we have to create this new narrative in which we are inclusive and inclusive of all kinds of life. And obviously that is an enormous task. I mean, it's a task of synthesis, and we don't just create a new narrative. We create a narrative which goes on synthesizing different moments in our history and incorporating all that is best in the current world in terms of science and technology, but at the same time, we just can't be continually adapting to. We must be taking control of, having human agency over change.
Thank you, Timothy, for this clarification. Fortunately, we will have to conclude now. Dalene and Giovanna, would you like to conclude with, well, you have each 1 minute if you want to say something as a conclusion.
Hi, Rosemine. Actually, in 1 minute, just to say thank you for this opportunity. I'm very happy. It was a real pleasure to learn with you in this process. I'm really glad that we ended up with so many important questions at this final discussion that I was following very concentrated here. And we are absolutely open to continue this conversation afterwards. I'm from CLADE and happy to collaborate further. Thank you.
Thank you also very much. It was a real honor to be invited to talk today and to do so with Giovanna. And I think that's what this is all about, is keeping the dialogue going, and also and that's not just talk for talk's sake, because action, even if it's being still, is important as well. But it's about the solidarity, and it's about the connections, those human connections, human and in nature, because we're coming from different places and we're situated in different contexts, and we speak from those different materialities. So it's about all of those things. So I just appreciate it, and thank you very much for contributing, and for all your wonderful contributions as well, and for the honor of being able to participate in this. And I hope we can carry this on towards solidarity and action.
Well, it's my turn to thank you all, the speakers and the participants. Thank you for those discussions and for sharing your thoughts and your critiques also. That was really great. As I told you, we will share a report that I will with UNESCO, that I will also share with you. If you need more information, or if you want to share, if you have more comments, please feel free to send me an email. And also, if you want to join other conversation that Bridge 47 is organizing, please join the network. I share with you the link if you want to receive emails from Bridge 47, and I will see with the team how we can further this conversation, this interesting conversation. And well, thank you all, and I wish you a great evening or a great day. It depends on where you are. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye now. Thank you, Rosamine.
Yeah,
and
bye-bye.
Dalene.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.